If a stranger ever knocks during a storm, Claire, open the door only if you are ready for your life to change. My father used to say that like it was a joke, one of those dramatic warnings paramedics collect after too many night shifts and too much bad coffee. I remembered it at 11:47 on a Thursday night, when the power died inside Oak Street Free Clinic and 3-week knocks came from the back entrance. Rain had been pounding Chicago for hours, hard enough to blur the streetlights into pale yellow smears beyond the windows. Wind pressed against the old brick building until the pipes groaned. I stood alone in exam room 2 with blood on my gloves, 16 hours of exhaustion in my bones, and $23 left in the clinic's emergency fund. My last patient had gone home 10 minutes earlier with antibiotics, 2 bus passes, and my promise that we would figure out the bill later. Maya had left before the train shut down. I should have locked the door and gone home. Instead, I heard the knocking again. 3 slow taps. Then silence. I took the flashlight from beneath the front desk. My fingers brushed the small emergency locator clipped beside my keys, an old piece of my father's paramedic equipment that Maya had rebuilt with a cellular signal for nights when one of us worked alone. Every sensible thought told me to activate it before opening the door. I opened the door anyway. A man stood beneath the narrow awning, one hand braced against the wall. Rain ran from his dark hair, over the sharp lines of his face, and down a white dress shirt that looked too expensive for our neighborhood. He was tall, maybe 6 feet 2 inches, with broad shoulders beneath a soaked black coat. He did not look homeless, lost, or afraid. He looked like a man who had never needed permission to enter anywhere. But his skin had gone pale, and his breathing was too controlled, the way people breathe when they are trying not to admit something is wrong. "The clinic is closed," I said. His gray eyes lifted to mine. "Steady. Exhausted. I need 10 minutes," he replied. "Then forget you saw me." Lightning flashed behind him, turning the alley white for half a second. That was when I noticed the dark stain spreading beneath his coat. I stepped forward before fear could catch up with training. "You need a hospital." "No hospital." "Then I am calling an ambulance." His hand closed around my phone before I could unlock it. Not harshly, just quickly, precisely. "No police. No ambulance. 10 minutes." I should have told him to leave. Instead, I heard my father's voice again. "Help first. Ask questions when the person can answer them." I pulled the door wider. "Come inside." He hesitated, as though kindness was the one thing he had not prepared for. Then his strength gave way. I caught his arm and guided him toward the nearest examination room, surprised by his weight and by how cold his hand felt through my glove. Under the emergency lamp, I removed his coat and found no visible injury that explained how quickly he was fading. His pulse was irregular. His pupils reacted too slowly. A faint puncture near his elbow made my stomach tighten. "Someone gave you something," I said. His jaw tensed. "Can you treat it?" "I can keep you stable until qualified help arrives." I prepared an intravenous line from the clinic's emergency supplies. "What is your name?" "Dominic." I reached for the medical kit, and the old silver paramedic pin on my scrub collar caught the red light. His eyes fixed on it. For the first time, the control left his face. He stared at the name engraved beneath the emblem. E. Bennett. His breathing stopped for one long second. Then he looked at me as though the storm had carried him to a door he had spent 20 years trying to find. "Bennett," he whispered, just before his eyes closed. His pulse weakened beneath my fingers, but the storm refused to let the city hear me panic. I lowered Dominic onto the examination table and forced my hands to remain steady. Fear could wait. Training could not. His breathing was shallow, his skin cold, and the puncture near his elbow confirmed what I already suspected. Someone had placed something in his system, something intended to leave him confused and defenseless. I checked his pupils again, adjusted the intravenous line, and searched his coat for identification. There was no wallet, no driver's license, no insurance card, only a broken phone, a silver key, and a black ring engraved with a crest I did not recognize. "Dominic," I said, leaning close enough for him to hear me over the rain. "Open your eyes." His eyelids moved, but he did not respond. "You asked for 10 minutes. You have used 6. Do not make me regret opening that door." His eyes opened slowly. Even half-conscious, he looked at me with unsettling focus. "What did they give you?" I asked. "I do not know." "Who are they?" "People who made a mistake." His answer was barely louder than the wind, but the certainty in it made the room feel smaller. You are in no condition to threaten anyone. That was not a threat. A faint sound came from the front of the clinic. Then another. Engines. More than one. Headlights swept across the windows, bright enough to cut through the emergency lights. I reached for my phone, but Dominic caught my wrist with what little strength he had left. Not the police, he said. Then tell me who just arrived. Before he could answer, a generator started outside. The clinic lights flickered once, twice, then returned. The heater rumbled awake. The hallway filled with the hum of machines that had been silent only seconds earlier. Car doors closed outside in perfect sequence. I stepped into the hallway as the front entrance opened. 4 men in dark suits entered, followed by a physician carrying a medical case. None of them looked surprised to find the door unlocked. None of them asked who I was. Their attention moved past me to the examination room, and something in their expressions changed. Relief, fear, respect. The tallest man approached me. Where is Mr. Hale? On my table, I said. Before anyone moves him, I need to know what was placed in his system. He stared at me as if no one had spoken to him that way in years. Noah Reed, head of security, Claire Bennett, registered nurse, and the person keeping him conscious. He gave one sharp nod, then brought the physician into the room. I explained Dominic's symptoms, the puncture mark, his irregular pulse, and every step I had taken. No one interrupted me. That frightened me more than shouting would have. When the physician decided Dominic was stable enough for transport, Noah helped him sit upright. Dominic looked toward my collar again, toward my father's pin. Her name, he said. Noah answered immediately. Claire Bennett. Dominic repeated it slowly, as though committing it to something deeper than memory. Then they took him into the ring. By sunrise, the generator had been removed, utility crews had restored power to the block, and 2 police cars were positioned at opposite corners without explanation. Maya arrived carrying coffee and stopped beside me at the front desk. Claire, she whispered, staring through the window. Do you know who that was? I looked down at the black ring still resting in my palm. No, her face lost its color. That was Dominic Hale. He does not live under this city's rules. Outside, every officer turned as another black vehicle passed. Maya lowered her voice. He is the reason powerful people follow them. The black ring stayed in my pocket for 3 days, heavier than something that small had any right to be. During those 3 days, Oak Street Free Clinic changed without my permission. The overdue electric bill disappeared from our account. 2 new cardiac monitors arrived before noon on Friday. By Saturday morning, the landlord called to say an anonymous community foundation had paid our rent for the next 12 months. Maya stood beside me in the supply room, holding the invoice with both hands. Anonymous foundations do not send equipment worth more than my car, she said. This one does. Claire, that man owns buildings, hospitals, restaurants, and enough influence to make people forget what they saw. I folded the invoice and placed it on the shelf. Then he can learn that gratitude has limits. Dominic arrived that afternoon with Noah waiting outside beside a black sedan. He entered alone, dressed in a charcoal coat, and carrying a flat leather folder beneath one arm. He looked stronger than he had during the storm, though there was still a careful stiffness in the way he moved. Every conversation in the waiting room softened when people recognized him. He noticed. Of course he noticed. The equipment is leaving, I said. Before he reached the desk, the rent payment will be reversed. You need both. Need does not mean consent. His gaze settled on me, calm and unreadable. Most people say thank you. Most people probably know what happens when they disappoint you. Something almost like amusement touched his face, then vanished. He placed the leather folder on the desk. This is not payment. Then what is it? An explanation. Inside was an old photograph, its edges faded and curled. A teenage boy lay beneath a wool blanket beside an ambulance, his face pale and frightened despite the defiance in his eyes. A paramedic knelt beside him, one hand resting firmly on the boy's shoulder. I recognized the silver pin before I recognized the face. My father looked younger, his hair darker, but his expression was the same one he wore whenever someone needed him to remain calm. My fingers tightened around the photograph. Where did you get this? I kept it. Dominic's voice had lost some of its steel. Your father found me near a warehouse fire 20 years ago. I had no identification and no safe place to go. He treated me, stayed with me, and refused to tell the wrong people where I was. I looked from the boy in the photograph to the man standing before me. You knew my name that night. I saw his pin. So the storm did not bring you to a complete stranger. I did not know you were his daughter until you opened the door. The clinic sounds faded around us. My father had been gone 7 years, but suddenly I could hear his laugh, smell the peppermint gum he chewed during long shifts, and feel the rough fabric of his old uniform jacket around my shoulders. Dominic touched the edge of the photograph, careful not to touch my hand. He saved the boy I was. You saved the man I became. That still does not make me yours to repay. His eyes lifted to mine. I never said it did. I removed the black ring from my pocket and placed it beside the photograph. Then take this back, cancel the payments, and let me decide what help this clinic accepts. Men like Dominic Hale were probably obeyed before they finished speaking. I was asking him to leave with less control than he had brought. Finally, he picked up the ring. The rent will be reversed. The equipment will remain only if the donation is made publicly, through a registered foundation and without conditions. Agreed. He closed the folder but left the photograph with me. Dr. Levin also wants you to know that the substance affected my heart rhythm. Cold, stress, or heavy exertion could trigger another episode for at least a week. Then you should be resting. I have never been good at that. At the door, he stopped. Claire, whoever placed that substance in my system knew my schedule, my medical history, and the route I would take that night. A cold weight settled behind my ribs. What are you saying? Dominic looked through the glass toward Noah, then back at me. The person who tried to remove me was not an enemy outside my organization. His voice dropped until only I could hear it. It was someone standing close enough to know exactly how I would fall. The warning stayed with me long after Dominic left, but fear did not arrive until the following night. Noah had stationed one plainclothes officer near the front entrance and another by the rear service alley, both far enough away not to frighten our patients. Oak Street Free Clinic had closed an hour earlier, and Maya was counting donated supplies while I finished patient notes at the front desk. Rainwater still tapped from the gutters in slow, uneven drops. Then the motion sensor light behind the building switched on. Maya looked toward the hallway. Did you hear that? I did. A cabinet door closing where no cabinet should have been open. I moved toward the records room and found the lock scratched, the door slightly ajar, and a man in a maintenance jacket standing beside the filing cabinets. He held no tools. He wore no identification. A copied service key hung from his belt. His eyes moved from the open drawer to my face, then to my father's silver pin. The clinic is closed, I said. He smiled without warmth. I took a wrong door. Then you can take the right one out. Footsteps sounded behind me. The officer from the front entrance appeared at the end of the hallway, followed seconds later by Noah, who had been monitoring the security feed from a vehicle across the street. No one raised a voice. No one needed to. The stranger was escorted outside, while Maya locked the front entrance with shaking hands. 10 minutes later, Dominic entered wearing a dark overcoat and an expression that made the room feel colder. You are leaving, he said. No, he stopped in front of me. That was not a request. Then it was the wrong sentence. Maya quietly stepped into the supply room, leaving us beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. Dominic looked toward the damaged records room door. Someone used a copied maintenance key to enter a medical clinic and search for information connected to you. You cannot remain here. My patients need this place. Your patients need you alive. His voice stayed controlled, but something beneath it had cracked. For the first time, I understood that his need to control everything was not arrogance alone. It was fear trained to wear a suit. Where do you expect me to go? I asked. My home. It is secure. Your home is also the center of the world that followed you to my door, which is why no one can reach you there. I crossed my arms. I will go temporarily, but only under 3 conditions. His eyebrows lifted slightly. You are negotiating with me? I am deciding what happens to my life. Silence settled between us. Outside, tires hissed over wet pavement. First, Maya and every patient connected to this clinic are protected. Quietly. No visible security frightening families in the waiting room. Agreed. Second, I keep my phone, my job, and the right to leave whenever I choose. His jaw tightened. That creates risk. It creates trust. He studied me for several seconds. Agreed. Third, you do not use me as an excuse to punish anyone. You find the truth before you act. That condition changed him. His eyes darkened, not with anger at me, but with the weight of something he already wanted to do. You think I cannot control myself. I think power makes anger feel like evidence. He looked away first. Agreed. An hour later, I sat in the back of Dominic's sedan as Chicago passed in wet reflections beyond the glass. His home rose above Lake Michigan behind iron gates and bare trees, all stone, light, and silence. Inside, people lowered their voices when he entered. Doors opened before he touched them. Everyone watched him, but no one seemed to know him. Near midnight, I found him alone in the kitchen, standing beside a cup of coffee he had not touched. His black ring rested on the counter. I noticed the chair positioned with a clear view of every entrance, the untouched food, and the way his hand moved toward his coat whenever the house made an unfamiliar sound. Who taught you that everyone eventually betrays you? His expression became still. The first person I ever trusted. Dominic looked at the cold coffee, as if the truth might be hiding in its reflection. My father, he said at last. He taught me that trust was a luxury men like us could not afford. I wanted to ask what men like us meant, but the exhaustion in his face stopped me. Instead, I reached for his wrist. Sit down. His eyes narrowed. Why? Because your pulse is too fast, and the puncture on your arm is not healing correctly. He obeyed with visible reluctance. Under the kitchen lights, I examined the mark near his elbow again. The skin around it had faded, but the angle bothered me. It was too precise, too clean. This was not done while you were resisting anyone, I said. Someone gave you an injection before you left wherever you were that night. Dominic became completely still. Are you certain? Certain enough to investigate. I asked about his symptoms before the storm. Dizziness, blurred vision, weakness that arrived too quickly. He remembered drinking coffee in his office, then feeling tired in the elevator. Only 4 people had been near him that evening. Noah, Dr. Levin, Evelyn Price, the house nurse, and Caleb Mercer, the man Dominic described as the closest thing he had to a brother. The next morning, I watched Dominic move through his world. He spoke with city officials in the library, approved repairs for apartment buildings on the south side, and quietly arranged hospital care for the elderly housekeeper's grandson. No cameras, no speeches, no expectation of gratitude. Yet every room changed when he entered. People straightened, voices lowered, eyes dropped. At lunch, a young employee spilled water across a stack of documents and nearly stopped breathing. Dominic said nothing cruel. He simply handed the man a towel and continued speaking. The employee still shook for 5 minutes. You know they are afraid of you, I said after everyone left. Fear keeps order. Fear keeps silence. Those are not the same thing. He looked toward the window, where Lake Michigan stretched beneath a gray sky. Silence is useful, until the person betraying you learns how to hide inside it. That reached him. I saw it in the way his hand closed around the black ring on his finger. What would you use instead, he asked. Respect. Clear rules. Consequences people understand before they make mistakes. That sounds idealistic. It sounds slower. Powerful men often confuse slower with weaker. For one brief second, Dominic smiled. Not the controlled expression he used in meetings. A real smile, small and almost surprised. It changed his entire face. Then Caleb Mercer arrived. He was broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and warm in a way no one else in the house seemed brave enough to be. He embraced Dominic, greeted me by name, and thanked me for saving his friend. Everything about him felt polished. Practiced. I brought the medical supplies Dr. Levin requested, Caleb said, placing a black leather bag on the table. Later, while Dominic took a call, I opened it to find fresh bandages, sterile syringes, and a sealed vial with a pharmacy label. It belonged to the same class of drugs that could explain Dominic's sudden weakness. My heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. That was how fear worked when it became certainty. I photographed the lot number, the pharmacy name, and the date printed on the label. The prescription had been filled 2 days before Dominic appeared at my door. When Caleb returned, I had already closed the bag. He smiled at me. Everything you need. Almost, I said. Across the room, Dominic looked between us, unaware that the man he trusted most had just delivered the first piece of evidence. I waited until Caleb left the room before I placed my phone in. The photograph of the vial on Dominic's desk. The library had gone quiet around us, filled only with the ticking of an old brass clock and the distant sound of rain against the windows. Dominic studied the pharmacy label, then looked at me. Where did you find this? Inside the medical bag Caleb brought. His expression did not change, but his hand stopped beside the black ring. That proves nothing. Not by itself. The medication matches your symptoms, and the fill date is 2 days before you collapsed. Dr. Levin can send a sample to an independent laboratory. Caleb has handled my medical care for years. That is exactly why he could hide something inside it. Dominic rose slowly. You do not know him. You are right. I know evidence. The door opened before he could answer. Caleb entered with 2 cups of coffee and an easy smile that disappeared when he saw the photograph on the screen. Is there a problem? Dominic's voice became colder. Claire found a medication in your bag that Dr. Levin says he did not request. Caleb set the cups down carefully. Then someone placed it there. Who? Dominic asked. Caleb looked toward the hallway. Noah had access to the bag before I arrived. He also knew your route that night. The accusation landed smoothly, prepared and polished. Dominic said nothing. Noah had served him for 12 years. Caleb had known him even longer. I could see old instincts closing around Dominic, telling him to trust history instead of truth. Do not decide now, I said. Both men looked at me. Verify the pharmacy record. Check the security cameras. Check who signed for the medication and who changed Dominic's route. Anger wants one answer. Evidence usually gives several. Caleb smiled faintly. You have been here 3 days, Miss Bennett. You should be careful about judging people you do not understand. Power does not reveal who is loyal, I said. It only teaches disloyal people how to hide. The room became still. Dominic looked at Caleb. Leave us. For the first time, Caleb's confidence slipped. Only slightly. Then he nodded and walked out. Dominic waited until the door closed. If he is innocent, this suspicion will destroy something that cannot be repaired. If he is guilty, protecting your memories will destroy more. He studied me for a long moment. What do you suggest? Let him believe you dismissed my concern. Send the vial to a laboratory he does not control. Then give each suspect different information about your schedule and watch what happens. By evening, the plan was moving. Noah received 1 false route. Dr. Levin received another. Evelyn received a 3rd. Caleb received a 4th. At 9 o'clock, Noah entered carrying a security report. The false location given to Caleb had been searched from the computer in his private office. Dominic read the page twice. His office. Noah nodded. And there is more. Someone accessed Oak Street Free Clinic's emergency plans this afternoon. He explained that Maya had returned to the clinic unexpectedly to sign for a refrigerated insulin delivery. The security team believed the building would remain empty, and a forged message bearing my name had redirected one officer to the rear loading area. A man carrying convincing city credentials had occupied the second officer at the front entrance. Call Maya, Dominic said. I was already dialing. She answered on the 4th ring, breathless and confused. Claire, there are people outside asking about a fire inspection. Behind her voice, I heard the front door handle move. Then the line went silent. The silence on Maya's line lasted only 3 seconds, but it felt long enough for the entire city to change. Maya, I said, gripping the phone. Step away from the door. A man's voice answered instead. Calm. Familiar. Good evening, Claire. Caleb. Dominic was already moving toward the entrance, issuing orders without raising his voice. Noah called the clinic security team and the police liaison assigned to Dominic's businesses. I kept the phone pressed to my ear. Where is Maya? Safe for now. She followed instructions better than you did. I forced myself to breathe slowly. Panic would make me careless, and Caleb was waiting for that. What do you want? Dominic knows. Tell him to bring the port access codes to the abandoned freight terminal beneath Wabash Avenue. Alone. The call ended. Dominic reached for his coat. You are staying here. Maya is at my clinic. Caleb wants you frightened enough to interfere. He turned to Noah. Prepare the teams. Quietly. I stepped between them. You promised not to use me as an excuse to tear through the city. I remember. His voice was controlled, but the fear beneath it was not. Before he could say more, the house alarm sounded. One clean tone. A fire warning appeared on the security screen, followed by an evacuation order for the East Wing. Staff moved toward designated exits while Noah tried to override the command. Evelyn Price, the house nurse who had arrived with Dominic's medical team during the storm, approached me carrying an emergency bag. Maya has been moved to a medical transport in the secure garage, she said. Noah wants you to speak with her before the vehicle leaves. I trusted Evelyn because I had treated patients beside her. That was the opening Caleb had purchased. My assigned guard received a cloned security command directing him to another stairwell. Evelyn led me through a service elevator that locked the moment the doors closed. Her face changed before we reached the garage. "I am sorry," she whispered. Two men were waiting beside a medical transport vehicle. No one handled me roughly. They did not need to. The secure doors closed behind us, and the vehicle entered downtown traffic before the house alarm was cleared. Caleb sat across from me with my phone in his hand. "Dominic will come," he said. "He always does when guilt is involved." I looked through the rain-streaked window and counted turns. 3 blocks east, then south beneath the elevated tracks. Finally, down a service ramp. I reached slowly into my coat. "My inhaler." Caleb nodded without interest. What I removed was my father's old emergency locator, the device Maya had rebuilt for lone worker emergencies. I pressed the recessed alarm button. The unit sent my location and a short text code to the clinic security account before the vehicle descended below street level. I entered the phrase my father had used during disaster drills. "Protect lives first. Do not escalate." Caleb watched my face, but not my hand. "Your father was a brave man," he said. My heart stopped. "You knew him?" "I knew of him. He pulled Dominic from a warehouse 20 years ago." His voice softened with something colder than anger. "That fire was supposed to remove a problem before it grew into an empire." I stared at him. "You started it. I created an opportunity. Your father ruined it." The vehicle slowed beneath the old freight terminal. Rainwater echoed through concrete service corridors. Caleb looked at my dark phone screen. "Dominic believes I betrayed him last week," he said. "The truth is, Claire, I began betraying him the night your father taught him he could survive." The abandoned freight terminal smelled of rain, rust, and old electricity. Water was already collecting in narrow drainage channels beside the loading platform, and a warning light near the wall showed that one of the pumps had failed. Caleb led me beneath a row of dim emergency lamps. Maya sat near a support column with a blanket around her shoulders. She looked frightened, but unharmed. Relief weakened my knees for half a second. Caleb noticed. "Your compassion is predictable," he said. "That is why Dominic will lose." The rumble of an elevated train passed somewhere above us, followed by footsteps descending the service stairs. Slow, unhurried. Dominic appeared alone at the far end of the platform, his dark coat open, his hands visible. He had left the black ring behind. What Caleb did not know was that Noah's teams were waiting beyond the freight entrance, using the final signal from my locator to identify the correct tunnel before moving. Caleb smiled. "The port codes." Dominic held up a small drive. "Release them first. You are not in a position to negotiate. I am exactly where you asked me to be." His voice carried through the terminal without effort, but I heard the difference beneath it. He was not speaking as the man who ruled rooms by fear. He was speaking as someone measuring every breath, every exit, and every life. Caleb moved closer to me. "Kneel, Dominic." Maya made a quiet sound beside me. Dominic did not look away from my face. Then he lowered himself onto one knee. The sight should have made him seem smaller. It did not. It made Caleb look desperate. "You built your empire from the future I deserved," Caleb said. "I taught you everything." "You taught me how to survive," Dominic answered. "Claire taught me what survival is for." Caleb reached for the drive, but Dominic let it fall between them. The plastic struck the concrete and split open. It was empty. At the same moment, the emergency lights brightened as Noah's team restored power from the street access point. I saw a red lever beside the column marked Emergency Access Gate Release. I pulled it. A locked side gate opened, giving Maya a clear route toward Noah and the officers entering from the service corridor. Caleb turned toward the sound. For 1 second, he looked less like the man who had controlled every move and more like someone watching his plan collapse. He was taken into custody without Dominic giving a single order. I moved toward Dominic as the failed pump alarm grew louder. Cold water had spread across the concrete, rising above our shoes. We started toward the stairs, but halfway up, Dominic stumbled. His breathing changed. The stress, the cold, and the exertion had triggered exactly what Dr. Levin had warned about. I guided him onto the landing and placed 2 fingers against his wrist. His pulse was rapid and irregular. "Sit still," I said. "Medical help is coming. Go with Maya." "Not without you." "That is an order." I kept my eyes on his. "You should know by now how well I follow those." I kept him seated, warm, and focused on my voice until the paramedics reached us with a cardiac monitor. His gray eyes found mine as they prepared to move him. "I thought saving you meant keeping you close," he said. "No," I whispered. "Saving me meant trusting me to stand beside you." Outside, red and blue lights reflected across the wet street. Maya wrapped her arms around me. Dominic stood beneath the awning after the paramedics cleared him for transport, pale but conscious, watching federal agents lead Caleb away. There was no anger in his face, no triumph. He made no demand for revenge. For the first time since I had met him, power had passed through his hands without becoming punishment. He had come to rescue me, but beneath that city, he had allowed me to rescue the man he was still learning to become. 3 months later, Oak Street Free Clinic opened its doors beneath a new sign bearing my father's name. The words Eli Bennett Community Health Fund appeared in small letters beneath the clinic's name, exactly as I had demanded. No family crest, no private conditions, no photograph of Dominic cutting a ribbon for the newspapers. He stood at the back of the waiting room while children colored at a folding table and Maya argued with a delivery driver about missing bandages. For once, no one lowered their voice when he entered. He had left the black ring in his car. Caleb's records had exposed years of stolen money, false contracts, and hidden payments. Dominic gave every document to federal investigators and refused to interfere with the case. People across Chicago expected retaliation. Instead, they watched businesses once controlled through fear begin the long process of becoming transparent, legal companies with public accounts, written contracts, and employees who could leave without consequences. The changes did not happen quickly. Real change never does. Some men walked away. Others tested the new rules. Dominic listened more than he threatened, and for a man who had built his life around commands, listening seemed to cost him more than surrender ever had. I did not move into his house. I returned to my apartment, my long shifts, and the radiator that knocked every night at 2 in the morning. He did not argue. At least, not for very long. He learned to ask before sending security. He learned that donating equipment did not give him permission to choose where it went. He even learned to sit in our waiting room like everyone else, although no one was brave enough to tell him that another patient's number had been called first. One snowy evening, I found him repairing a loose chair near the front desk while an 8-year-old boy explained, in painful detail, how to use a screwdriver. Dominic followed every instruction. "You own half the buildings on this block," I said. "You could hire someone." He said I was holding it wrong. The boy nodded seriously. He was. I laughed before I could stop myself. Dominic looked up at the sound, and something quiet passed between us. Not ownership, not debt, choice. Later, after the clinic closed, we stood beneath the awning where I had first found him. Snow drifted across the empty street, softening the city until even the traffic sounded distant. "Your father would have hated the sign," Dominic said. "He hated attention. He would have hated the budget meetings more." Dominic smiled, then placed the restored photograph in my hand. The colors were clearer now. My father knelt beside a frightened teenage boy who had no idea what he would become. "I spent 20 years believing I owed him my life," Dominic said. "You did." "No." He gave me another chance. I decided what to do with it. I looked at the man beside me, at the faint mark near his elbow, and at the open hands that no longer reached for control every time he felt afraid. "That is the first sensible thing you have said since we met." He offered his arm, not as an order, but as a question. I took it. He had ruled Chicago long before he came to my door. He knew how to make streets fall silent, how to move money, and how to make powerful men wait. But after the storm, he began asking a harder question. Not whether the city feared him, whether he deserved its trust. Somewhere between the boy my father saved and the man I chose to stand beside, Dominic Hale learned that power could force obedience, but only humanity could make someone stay.